Is this basically the high court saying you can go ahead and continue to use this drug cocktail despite these botched executions?
Absolutely. They've made it very clear that the burden rests with the petitioner in this case to prove that this drug violates, any drug violates the Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment clause, and that there are no safer alternatives. The petitioner themselves is going to have to bring before the court some alternative that's less likely to cause a problem than midazolam in this case.
And it's hard to see how that could happen. These three plaintiffs were three convicted criminals who are on death row. The constitutionality of the death penalty was not in question here, and yet you see Justice Breyer referring to that in his dissent. Is this a question that the court, you would expect, would have to look at again in the near future, given all of the conversations we've had about cultural change in this country?
Absolutely. What was interesting in the oral arguments is the question was a very narrow one about the use of midazolam, but the questioning in the oral argument was really about the broader issue of the death penalty. And Justice Breyer wrote a dissenting opinion in this case in which he calls into question the very nature of capital punishment in our society in the 21st century. Now, he only got 2 votes, so there clearly is not a vote to overturn it, but that was responded to by Justice Scalia with a full-throated argument in favor of the death penalty. So they are definitely debating the larger issue here at the court.
And in fact, during oral arguments, the two most conservative, or two of the most for sure, Scalia and Alito, both characterized it that way. It was Alito who called it a guerrilla war against the death penalty, this attempt to get rid of the use of midazolam. So was this the High Court's message to death penalty opponents in some ways?
I think it was very clearly the message was, do not keep tinkering with these drugs, making them unavailable, and then claiming that what's left is cruel and unusual. They were really calling into question the entire methodology of trying to attack the death penalty. But I think what they missed, though, is the reason that other drugs aren't available is because the European Union, where these drugs are manufactured, because of their political opposition to the death penalty, has not allowed those companies to send them to the United States for the purpose of capital punishment.
And as a result, you have these compounding pharmacies making these drugs sort of in secret.
Absolutely, without any indication. Nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody knows the purity of these drugs. And as a result, we've seen these continued problems with the actual administration of the death penalty.
What do you think the greater implications of this are for the states that do use this drug cocktail? We have seen at least 3 botched executions in the last year as a result of these drugs. Do they continue to use them, or do they look for other means? I mean, some states are thinking of putting firing squads back in place, gas chambers.
I think that they are going to do both at the same time. They are going to continue to use this, but search, very, very carefully for some alternative, because there's still a strong majority in favor of the death penalty. But the bottom line is the optics of these botched executions is really not good for the people who believe in the death penalty.